Hey guys, what's up? It's Brother. Welcome you back to another Pokemon TCG Pocket video. This video is going to focus on a new themed booster pack coming our way called Eevee Grove and will be dropping on June 26th. It was kind of inevitable that an Eevee set like this was going to come out eventually, but it's just kind of funny since all the prismatic stuff and literally not being able to get it, so hey, you can at least get your digitized cardboard. But moving on into the actual cards, of course, all of the Eeveelutions are going to be here, and we start off with Eevee EX. It is a basic Pokemon with 90 HP and is colorless, and has the ability Evolve. This Pokemon can evolve into any Pokemon that evolves from Eevee if you play it from your hand onto this Pokemon. And then you also have Bite for 30 damage. The clause of the ability is a little weird, but really what this is saying is that you can use this Eevee EX to actually evolve into a regular non-EX Eeveelution. So for example, if you were going to run something like Vaporeon for a water deck, you could instead use this Eevee EX and still evolve into that Vaporeon. However, I will be completely honest and say I am not really sure why you would play this card. The risk of running an EX Pokemon with less than 90 HP and potentially losing 2 points very early on in the game is really not ideal. Especially if you match up into something bad, let's say fighting, you could potentially just have this Eevee KO'd on your second turn, and that's no good. Maybe if you're an Eevee enthusiast, you just want to have this in your deck, but honestly, from my perspective, you are better off and safer off just running the basic non-EX Eevees to try and get into your Eeveelutions. We then move on into the actual Eeveelutions and of course start off with Gen 1. This is featuring Vaporeon as 120 HP, water type, and has Hyper Whirlpool for 70 damage. Flip a coin until you get tails. For each heads, discard a random energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. Now, in my opinion, this is pretty good. The ability to slow down your opponent and deny them energies is extremely important. And I don't even think the 3 energies slows this down at all, because water is one of the decks that is able to just burst out water energies. Sometimes it can be random if you miss your Misty, or if you don't get all of the tools to kind of make Manaphy work. But really, I just see this as an amazing card. I think that you could run a strictly Vaporeon deck. Of course, having 120 HP doesn't really make it an amazing closer, but I think just as a Pokemon in general, this is pretty great. Next up we have Jolteon with 90 HP and his electric type. You also have Beginning Bolt for 1 energy and 40 plus damage. If this Pokemon evolved during this turn, this attack does 20 more damage. Now I think thematically an attack like this fits Jolteon, but it's also really disappointing that after the first attack, you're, doing 60 damage, and then for the remainder of the game, no matter how long you have this, it'll just be 40 damage. For 1 energy, 40 damage is fine, and assuming you match into a good type weakness, then sure, that's also great. But if you're running a dedicated strategy to Thunder or Electric in this case, I'm not really sure that this one's probably going to make the cut for most decks. We then transition into our first EX of the Eeveelutions, Flareon EX. It's a fire type with 150 HP and has the ability Combust. Once during your turn, you may attach a fire energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. If you do 20 damage to this Pokemon. And then you have Fire Spin for 3 energies and it does 130 damage, but you must discard 2 fire energy from this Pokemon. Now to me, this Pokemon is not nearly as bad as some might anticipate. Having an ability that deals damage to yourself is never ideal, but assuming it's near the mid game and you've already got 1 energy committed to this Pokemon, I think that you are going to be getting a lot of value from Flareon. Because to me, it kind of fulfills the same role as Ninetales, where it's doing a whole lot of damage, but you kind of have to commit your energy to it each turn. In this scenario, you're able to use Combust and essentially get the 2 fire energies that you would discard back onto it, because you get the one from the discard pile and then you get one from the manual attach. Now, is this going to make huge waves in the meta? I actually don't know. I do think that there are other fire type Pokemon, EX and non-EX, that kind of benefit more from the current archetype as it is. But compared to some of the Eeveelutions in this set, I actually do think Flareon EX does have a chance of getting some play. And because Flareon is my favorite Eeveelution, of course, I'm gonna have to give it a try. Then we move on to the Gen 2 Eeveelutions, starting with Espeon. It's a Psychic type with 100 HP, and then has the move Energy Crush for 1 energy, and then 20 times. This attack does 20 damage for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, this does not specify the active Pokemon, which means that honestly, this could be an incredibly nice tech card, but the caveat for me is that it's not doing a ton of damage, or not as much damage as I would like it to. I think the devs really did have to do a kind of tightrope walk with this card to try and not make it so overpowered, but still give it some playability. Unfortunately, I don't think that the 20 times is really going to help it, and, you know, it's still good, but assuming that you KO the Pokemon that has all the energies on it, it then kind of goes back to this really mediocre Pokemon. Next up is Umbreon. It has 100 HP and is a dark type, and then it has Dark Binding for 1 energy, does 40 damage, and if the defending Pokemon is a basic Pokemon, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. I think that this will have a very special place in some stall decks. In the meta, whether it's honestly paper play for the standard TCG or for Pokemon TCG Pocket Live, we're seeing a lot of EX Pokemon that are basic, strictly because they are super easy to play around. And I think that Umbreon can be a Pokemon that, for a specific meta, could be a complete counter to it. Now, I haven't really kept up enough with the meta, especially the Ultra Beast, to really know what exactly is doing fantastic right now, but the fact that it is a basic Pokemon in general, not specifically a basic Pokemon EX, I think has a ton of value. So of all these Pokemon so far, I think that Umbreon has the most potential undoubtedly. Moving on into the Gen 4 Eeveelutions, we have Leafeon. It has 90 HP and is a grass type. It has the attack Leaf Blast for 1 energy and has 10 plus damage, and this attack does 20 more damage for each grass energy attached to this Pokemon. So say hello to probably what will be one of the new Superior strategies. Having 2 energies attached to this Leafeon and then having Superior means that it will be doing 90 damage. Assuming you get a similar opportunity to Celebi EX to sort of build it up and then get these opportunities for damage, Leafeon kind of does the same thing, just with the exception of it has a lower ceiling, but it is guaranteed to be doing damage. Whereas with Celebi, you know, you could be flipping 10 coins, but heck, at the end of the day, you could still get 1 heads or 0 heads, right? So I don't know. I think that this Pokemon does have a lot of potential, but it definitely requires a specific deck to build around it, which again is already positioned pretty well because Superior is already an excellent grass archetype. Then moving on to Glaceon, it's a water type with 100 HP, and it has Ice Blade for 2 water energies, and this attack does 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. I think that this is just a generically good card. It's difficult for me to place this because, for one, the tempo of this card is a little difficult to use because it needs 2 energies. But the option of attacking any Pokemon with 50 damage is always good, especially on the bench, because if you run Cyrus, then you can force a Pokemon in and potentially get a KO. But my biggest problem is I really don't know where this would fit in the current meta. I feel like we already have a lot of Pokemon right now that do enough damage to the bench that kind of already fit this role and maybe even do it better just by spreading out damage to every bench Pokemon by doing, you know, the 10, and then you have the option of who you want to switch in the Cyrus. And just to reiterate, I think that Glaceon's fine, but I just don't know if its niche is going to be powerful enough to justify it in some of these decks. And as for the last remaining Eeveelution, we are moving on into Gen 6 with Sylveon EX. It's a stage 1 Pokemon, of course, with 140 HP and is Psychic type. The ability Happy Ribbon states once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may draw 2 cards. And it also has the attack Fairy Wind, which is 2 energy for 70 damage. So I think Sylveon EX is fine. Its weakness being specifically Steel in this case, and not something like Darkness, is probably going to help in the long run. Being able to do 70 damage for 2 energies is pretty okay, especially on a tempo play. And the ability Happy Ribbon is just icing on the cake. This is a good card that has a useful ability on it. So I think that Sylveon EX will see play. I just don't know if comparatively to the meta that it's going to make a huge splash. We then have 2 Eevee associated trainers, first starting with the supporter, Penny. Look at a random supporter card that's not Penny from your opponent's deck and shuffle it back into their deck. Use the effect of that card as the effect of this card. So if that was a little confusing, you look at your opponent's remaining deck, you find a supporter, and then you copy the ability of that supporter. So in an example where I find Professor's Research, Penny will then copy the effect of Professor's Research. Penny is a card that I don't know is going to be very powerful. Yes, everybody basically plays Pokeball and plays Professor's Research, so yes, there's always the option with Penny to hit those cards, but assuming your opponent pops off turn 1, turn 2, and they have the Pokeballs and they have the Professor's Research to play, and those are already in the discard pile, what is Penny gonna hit? Because a lot of other supporters are either situational, like in the case of Sabrina or Cyrus, where they might not always be wanted, or you're in a situation where you have something like Blaine, and so the effect that you're targeting just does not help your deck. In other videos, I've stated that the deck size in Pokemon TCG Pocket is extremely tight, especially with a lot of the cards that you want to play as your staples, and I really don't think Penny makes that cut. Then we have an item card in Eevee bag. You have one of two effects that you can choose. The first one being during this turn, attacks used by your Pokemon that evolve from Eevee do 10 plus damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, and the second one being heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon that evolves from Eevee. So if you're playing an Eevee dedicated strategy, you're going to be playing Eevee bag. Like, it's just a kind of all-around really nice card, and being able to heal all of your potential Eeveelutions is good. And people will still underestimate the power of 10 extra damage, because there will be people who just will think that they're completely safe, and then that 10 damage is all it takes to take a point and win the game. So I think this is a super solid card. The fact that this is not a supporter and is just an item card is very, very, very useful. And so I had to do a double take when I saw these cards at the very end, because one, they're not Eeveelutions, but of course, you know, this set wasn't going to just be like 10 cards about Eevee and then you're just done. No, there's going to be other stuff here. But specifically the attacks here kind of made me scared until I read everything fully. And I'll be going slightly out of order here, but it'll make sense once I've discussed all of these cards. First up being Swirlix, it's a Psychic type Pokemon with 60 HP, and it has the attack Sweets Relay for 1 energy. It does 10 plus damage, saying if one of your Pokemon use Sweets Relay during your last turn, this attack does 20 more damage. Moving on, we have Milcery with 50 HP and is also a Psychic type with, again, the move Sweets Relay. Nothing different here. Basically, if you use Sweets Relay during your last turn, you do 20 more damage. And then we have Alcremie, who kind of shows what Sweets Relay is really building up to. It has 80 HP, is a Psychic type, and has the move Sweets Overload for 1 energy. And just going on to the effect, this attack does 40 damage for each time your Pokemon use Sweets Relay during this game. So I honestly have no idea how this is going to go. Putting yourself in an ideal situation, what you've done is you've opened Milcery and you're going second and you're able to attach an energy and use Sweets Relay. After another 2 turns of using Sweets Relay with Milcery or another Pokemon like Swirlix, you then put in Alcremie on turn 4 and Sweets Overload will do 120 damage because you've used it 3 times during the course of the battle. And so here are the conditions that I think Alcremie has to commit to make it work as a strategy. The first is that you have to commit to 1-point Pokemon. Losing an EX Pokemon very early is not going to do very well for you, and you're playing around a Glass Cannon strategy where Alcremie only has 80 HP, so the moment it does a crap ton of damage, great. You've probably gotten 2 points because you just KO'd an EX Pokemon. But if anything is coming in after the fact that's going to in turn KO Alcremie, then you need to make sure that your opponent is getting as few points as possible. And second is that you can play into cards that will support Alcremie like Giant Cape and Irida. Now before you try and interrupt me, you can play Irida into a deck like this because you can play Water Energies since Alcremie has a colorless cost. Now how useful is that? Because Alcremie can get KO'd in 1 hit? I'm not really sure. But if you're going to run a strategy like this, I think that you want to lean on Alcremie as much as possible, and so especially if you wait for 4 turns, you could also use a card like Red and potentially KO an opponent's EX Pokemon. Now, is this going to be a meta strategy? I'm not really sure, but there are a lot of decks right now that are playing slow until they get their main strategy online, and Milcery and Swirlix are low commitment enough that you can commit to this strategy and pivot if you need to. So I don't know, I think that Alcremie could have a huge place in the meta, but I will reiterate that I think it's going to lean heavily on good deck construction to make it pop off. And after that, that is everything for this new themed booster pack. Once again, Eevee Grove will be available to us on June 26th. If you like this video, of course, leave a like and comment down below if there are any cards in the set you are currently excited for, whether they are ones I discussed or ones that are kind of headed on the way, may have already been leaked ahead of time. Regardless, I will stop yapping. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Hopefully you're having a fantastic night or day wherever you may be. Hope to see you next time.
See ya!